I remember the day it began like shards of glass, jagged fragments of a life that no longer fits together. The pain came first, sharp, burrowing at the base of my skull where vertebrae kiss bone. Then the taste of iron flooding my mouth. Not blood, something older, colder, like licking the hull of a void ship that's drifted too long through the places between stars. I was Arvin Creel then, dock worker, crate lifter, rivet counter, a man of no consequence on a world of fading importance. Forge World Helios Secundus, once proud manufacturer of chimera transports and basilisk artillery, now reduced to patchwork replacement parts and low-grade munitions. The forge temples still belched black smoke into the perpetual twilight. But the priests of the machine god spoke only in hushed, anxious tones. Production quotas, resource allocation, efficiency protocols. Words that meant hunger was coming. The underhive where I lived was called the sump by some, the dregs by others. Names didn't matter there. Only survival did. That night, I took my usual walk home through maintenance tunnels slick with condensation. The endless clank of machinery echoed in the dark, a sound that never ceased, never slept. The air tasted of promethium and rust. My muscles throbbed from 14 hours of loading ammunition crates onto cargo haulers bound for war zones whose names we were not allowed to know. The attack came without warning. No sound, no shadow. Only the sudden brush of something wet against my neck, and then pain. A pain that was more than pain. My memories splinter there. I recall falling, the cold metal grating beneath my cheek. A shape, something that should not exist in the rational world of the Omnissiah, moving with terrible purpose. I recall claws, too many limbs. The awful grace of a predator that has already won. And then nothing, except fever dreams that lasted for what might have been days. When I awoke in my HAB unit, I told myself it had been an illness, a toxic miasma from the chemical sumps below. The wound at the base of my neck had already sealed into a hard knot of scar tissue. I should have reported it. I should have sought the ministrations of the machine cult's biologists. But on a forge world, weakness is punished. Missed shifts mean hunger. The changes were subtle at first. Food tasted wrong, flat, lifeless. Shadows seemed to shift when I wasn't looking. My dreams became vivid, filled with visions of vast hollow spaces and the sensation of falling upward into an endless void. I woke drenched in sweat, jaw aching from grinding my teeth. Work became impossible. The clangor of the manufactorum, once just unpleasant, now lanced through my skull like molten iron. The foreman noticed my distraction, my lagging output. 2 warning marks in a single week. A third meant half rations. I couldn't allow that. Then came the first blackout. One moment I was walking home, taking my usual route through the maintenance tunnels. The next I was standing in a section of the underhive I didn't recognize. My hands were wet. My mouth tasted of copper and salt. 3 hours gone, swallowed by a darkness in my mind I dared not probe. Just exhaustion, I told myself. Just fatigue toxins. But I knew it was a lie. Even as I whispered it, something inside me had changed. Something had been placed within me during that attack. It was growing, gestating. In the privacy of my filthy HAB unit, I examined myself under the weak lumen strips. My skin had gone ashen, my veins darkened and pronounced. In the cracked mirror, my canines had lengthened, just enough to notice. But the worst was the hunger. Not for protein gel or synthetic carb wafers. This was a hunger without a name. A craving for something I couldn't identify, gnawing at me from the inside. A parasite demanding to be fed. I began to hear whispers, not with my ears, but inside my skull. They were not words, but impressions. Hunger, anticipation, purpose. Emotions without language. I would catch myself standing motionless for minutes at a time, head tilted as though eavesdropping on a distant conversation, before snapping back into awareness. The blackouts grew worse. An hour gone here, 3 hours there, once an entire day vanished. I came to in the deepest reaches of the underhive, in tunnels even the most desperate avoided. My clothing was torn. There was dried blood under my fingernails. I did not dare wonder whose. I should have ended it then. A misaligned plasma conduit would have been quick. Or I could have requested assignment to the chemical sumps, where life expectancy was measured in weeks. The rational part of me, the human part, knew something terrible was happening, that I was becoming a vessel for something other. But there was another part now, stronger each day, that would not permit such thoughts. It whispered of patience, of purpose, of the glory that would come when the stars shifted and the Great Devourer arrived to consume all. I saw the first of my kind 63 days after the attack. By then, I had taken to wandering the underhive during my periods of lucidity, drawn by instincts I did not understand toward places I had never walked before. In a chamber that might once have been a secondary plasma regulation station, long abandoned, I found them. 3 figures, hunched and malformed, their bodies caught between humanity and something else. One still wore the shredded remains of a manufactorum uniform. Another bore the augmetic arm of a tech servitor. The third was further along in its metamorphosis, its skull elongated, its jaw distended, its mouth lined with too many teeth. They did not speak. They did not need to. Recognition swept over me like a wave, a psychic acknowledgement of kinship. The human part of me recoiled in horror. The other part felt, for the first time, belonging. What is happening to me? My own voice sounded strange, distant, as if it came from somewhere else. The one with the augmetic arm lurched forward, movements jerky, uncoordinated, as though it hadn't yet learned to control its changing body. Its fingers had begun to fuse, the flesh hardening into something like chitin. "You are awakening," it rasped, its tongue thick and no longer fully human. "You are becoming. You are preparing the way." The way for what? The creature tilted its head, an unsettlingly inhuman gesture. For those who made us, for the hive that hungers, for the Great Devourer. I knew the name, though I had never heard it spoken aloud. On a forge world, certain knowledge is restricted, deemed dangerous to productivity and morale. But rumors seep through the underhive like toxins through groundwater, whispers of horrors beyond the stars, of worlds stripped of life, left as barren husks drifting in the void, Tyranids, the Great Devourer, the doom between the stars. "We were human," I whispered, clinging to the fading memory of what that meant. "We were alone," it corrected. "Now we are part of something greater. The brood mind grows. The beacon strengthens. Soon they will hear our call." I fled then, the human part of me still strong enough to recognize the horror of what awaited. Yet even as I ran through the twisting tunnels, I felt their presence in my mind, patient, not angry, certain that the changes within me would continue, that the thing I was becoming would eventually consume what remained of Arvin Creel. I resolved to fight it, to cling to my humanity for as long as possible. I volunteered for extra shifts, hoping exhaustion would quiet the whispers. I carried a small blade stolen from the manufactorum, promising myself that if the blackouts worsened, if I woke again with blood on my hands, I would use it on myself before I became a weapon for something else. For a time, it seemed to work. The whispers receded to the edges of my consciousness. The blackouts became less frequent. I dared to hope that perhaps the infection or whatever it was might be fought off, might be contained. Then came the compliance inspection. Every solar cycle, agents of the Adeptus Mechanicus would descend from the upper spires to assess productivity and resource allocation throughout the forge world. These were times of tension and fear, for those deemed inefficient or unnecessary would be repurposed to more hazardous duties, or worse, rendered down for their chemical components in the corpse starch processes. I was at my station, loading crate after crate of bolter shells onto the conveyor, when I felt it, a presence at the edges of my mind, vast and cold and hungry. The tech priests had brought something with them this cycle. something that could see through human disguises, that could detect the alien taint in human flesh. A servitor sentinel, its body a grotesque fusion of human remains and detection equipment. Its eye lenses swiveled independently, scanning the laborers as they worked. I kept my head down, my movements mechanical, trying to project the dull obedience expected of Forge World laborers, but I could feel its senses lingering on me, analyzing, detecting the subtle wrongness in my biochemistry. The whispers in my mind suddenly intensified, a chorus of alarm spreading through what I now understood was a psychic network connecting me to the others of my kind, the brood mind awakening to a threat. I felt them stirring from their hiding places throughout the underhive, a simultaneous response to danger. The sentinel approached my station, its augment limbs whirring softly. I kept working even as cold sweat beaded on my forehead. It stopped 3 men away, its main sensor array focused directly on me. Subject displays anomalous biochemical signatures. It in-owned its Vox grill, producing a flat, emotionless declaration. Potential xeno-contamination detected. Subject is to be isolated for further examination. 2 security servitors detached from their positions along the wall, moving to flank me. I had seconds before they would restrain me before I would be taken to the biologist labs for dissection and analysis. Discovery would mean not just my death, but a purge of the entire underhive sector. A cleansing that would kill thousands, including any others who carried the same taint I did. The human part of me, Arvin Creel, the dock worker, wanted to surrender, to confess, to warn the Forge world of the infection spreading through its lowest levels. But that part of me was no longer in control. The change came over me with shocking speed. My vision sharpened, colors becoming more vivid, smells more intense. I could hear the whir of servos in the security units, could sense the patterns of their programming. My muscles tensed, suddenly stronger, more responsive, and for the first time, I felt the physical changes manifest fully. My fingers elongating into claws, my jaw unhinging slightly to accommodate the teeth that now filled my mouth. I moved without conscious thought, driven by instincts implanted by the thing that had attacked me in the darkness. The first security servitor went down before it could react, my newly formed claws tearing through the interface between its organic components and mechanical parts. The second managed to raise its stun baton, but it was designed to subdue unaugmented humans, not the creature I had become. The Sentinel was more dangerous. It fired a burst from an integrated laser weapon, the beam scorching my shoulder as I twisted away. The pain was distant, unimportant. I leapt, covering the distance between us in a single bound, and tore into its sensor array, ripping away the delicate equipment that had detected my true nature. Only then did I become aware of the screams, the other workers, witnessing my transformation, my violence. Their terror cut through the battle haze, reaching the part of me that was still Arvin Creel. I looked down at my hands, now twisted into weapons that no human should possess, and felt a moment of utter horror at what I had become. The klaxons began to wail, security protocols engaging. Bulkheads would be sealing, cutting off escape routes. I ran, moving with a speed and agility I had never before possessed, heading for the maintenance tunnels that would lead me deep into the underhive, away from the light, away from humanity. As I fled, I felt the brood mind stirring fully to wakefulness, the psychic network connecting me to my kin humming with activity. The discovery had forced their hand. The careful, patient infiltration was over. Now would come the uprising, the seizing of key infrastructure, the calling of the beacon that would summon the Hive Fleet. And I, who had once been Arvin Creel, would play my part in the doom of Forge Helios Secundus. In the deepest reaches of the underhive, in chambers untouched by human feet for centuries, I found the others gathering, dozens of them, in various stages of transformation. Some, like me, still mostly human in appearance despite the changes beneath the skin. Others further along, their humanity almost entirely subsumed by the alien genetic code, rewriting them from within. and a few, the oldest infections, so changed as to be barely recognizable as having once been human at all. At the center of the chamber stood the Patriarch, the first of our kind on this world, the progenitor from whom all infection had spread. It was massive, easily twice the height of a human. Its body a horrifying amalgamation of Genestealer and human traits, twisted together through generations of careful breeding. 4 arms, each ending in vicious claws, a skull elongated to house the expanded brain that served as the nexus of the brood mind. Eyes that held an alien intelligence, ancient and cold and utterly inhuman. I approached with the others, drawn by a compulsion I could not resist. The Patriarch reached out with its primary limbs, gently, almost tenderly placing its claws upon my head, and then the full force of the brood mind crashed into me like a tidal wave. I saw the plan unfolding across decades, the patient infiltration of the Forge world's lower levels, the careful conversion of key personnel, the gradual sabotage of detection systems and security protocols, all to prepare for the day when the Hive Fleet would arrive, drawn by the psychic beacon of thousands of infected minds calling out in unison. I saw the fate that awaited humanity on this world. Consumption, absorption, the rendering down of all biomass to feed the eternal hunger of the Tyranid swarm. And I saw my role in this apocalypse, the purpose for which I had been remade. The human part of me recoiled in horror, tried to scream, to fight against the destiny being forced upon me. But that part was growing weaker by the hour, crushed under the weight of the broodmind's will. I was no longer an individual, but a cell in a vast organism, a single note in a symphony of destruction. When the Patriarch released me, I fell to my knees, shaking with the enormity of the vision I had been granted around me. Others were receiving the same communion, the same revelation of purpose. Some wept, others chittered in alien joy. All accepted. "The time of hiding is over," said one of the more advanced hybrids, its voice a rasping approximation of human speech. "The Mechanicus knows of our presence now. We must accelerate the timetable." "The beacon is not yet at full strength," argued another. "The Hive Fleet may not detect us if we call too soon." The Patriarch made a sound, a complicated series of clicks and hisses that needed no translation. The decision had been made. The uprising would begin immediately. I was assigned to a strike team tasked with seizing one of the Underhive's primary power distribution nodes. The human engineers there would be either converted or consumed. Their biomass used to strengthen the brood. The facility itself would be repurposed, its energy diverted to power the psychic beacon that would call to the Hive Fleet. As we moved through the maintenance tunnels toward our objective, I fought a desperate internal battle. The part of me that was still Arvin Creel, still human, railed against what I was about to do. Images of the engineers, ordinary men and women, no different from who I had been, about to face horror and death at my hands. But the hybrid part, growing stronger with each passing hour, saw only prey, only biomass to be harvested for the brood. We emerged into the power distribution facility through maintenance ducts too small for an unmodified human to navigate. The night shift was minimal, just 4 engineers monitoring the systems. They had no warning. The first died before he could even turn from his monitoring station, my claws severing his spine with surgical precision. The second managed to hit the alarm, but the third member of our strike team had already sabotaged the communication systems. The alarm wailed uselessly, its warning confined to this chamber alone. The third engineer fought back with surprising strength, wielding a heavy wrench as an improvised weapon. For a moment, the human part of me hoped she might escape, might warn others. Then the fourth member of our strike team dropped from the ceiling onto her back, its weight driving her to the floor. I looked away as it began to feed. The final engineer we took alive as instructed. The female hybrid, named Vex, once a Medicate technician before her conversion, restrained him as I approached. He thrashed in her grip, eyes wide with terror as he beheld my partially transformed state. Emperor, protect me, he whispered, a prayer that would go unanswered. I leaned close, feeling the alien organ at the back of my throat activate, extending outward. The ovipositor through which the infection would be passed. A kiss of sorts, the most intimate violation possible. This will hurt, I said. The human part of me offering this small mercy of warning, but then you will understand. You will be part of something greater. His screams as the infection began were mercifully brief. With the facility secured and its staff either eliminated or converted, we began the process of reconfiguring the power distribution systems. None of us had been engineers in our human lives, but the knowledge was there in the brood mind, extracted from the minds of those who had been converted before us. We worked with the eerie coordination of insects in a hive, each performing our assigned task without need for verbal communication. As I rerouted power conduits, diverting energy from the manufacturum levels to our hidden nest deep in the underhive, I felt the brood mind's satisfaction washing over me. Similar operations were underway throughout the Forge world's lower levels. Power facilities, water reclamation plants, air circulation systems, all being seized, all being repurposed to support the brood and strengthen the beacon. But I also felt something else. A disturbance in the psychic network that connected us all. Alarm, pain, the sudden silencing of multiple nodes in the brood mind. Some of our kin were dying. The Mechanicus had responded more quickly and more decisively than the Patriarch had anticipated. Skitarii kill teams were descending into the underhive, guided by Servitor scouts and Tech Priest biology's experts who could detect the subtle signs of Genestealer infestation. They moved with the ruthless efficiency for which the Adeptus Mechanicus was known, purging any sector where contamination was detected regardless of collateral damage to uninfected human workers. I felt the deaths of my broodkin as phantom pains, brief flashes of agony before their connections to the brood mind were severed. The human part of me felt a surge of hope at this development, at the possibility that the infection might be contained, the Forge world saved. The hybrid part felt only alarm and a growing determination to complete our mission before Thekatari could reach us. We finished the power reconfiguration and received new orders through the brood mind. We were to proceed deeper into the underhive to the chamber where the Patriarch was overseeing the construction of the beacon. All available broodkin were being called back to defend this most crucial of assets. If the beacon could be activated even for a brief time, it might be enough to alert the Hive Fleet to our presence. The Great Devourer would come, and all the forces of the Mechanicus would be as nothing before its hunger. As we moved through the twisting tunnels of the underhive, I found myself hoping that we would encounter Akatari patrol, that we would be purged before we could reach the beacon, that my death might in some small way help to prevent the doom that was coming for this world. But we met no resistance. The Skitarii were methodical in their advance, clearing each sector before moving to the next. We kept ahead of their line of advance, ghosting through areas they had not yet reached. The beacon chamber was a vast space that had once been a secondary plasma reactor, long ago decommissioned and forgotten by the tech priests above. The reactor itself had been gutted, its interior transformed into something that defied human aesthetics or engineering principles. Organic matter grown or harvested from victims had been fused with mechanical components stripped from forge-oiled machinery. The entire structure pulsed with a life of its own, tendrils of some unknown biological material writhing across its surface. At its center stood the Patriarch, its massive form connected to the beacon by umbilical cords of the same organic material that composed the structure. Around it gathered the most advanced of the hybrids, those whose transformations had progressed to the point where they barely resembled humans at all. They swayed in eerie unison, a physical manifestation of the psychic chant that was already beginning to resonate through the brood mind. We took our places among the outer circles of the gathering, adding our psychic voices to the growing chorus. I felt the power building, the psychic pressure increasing as more and more of our kind joined the chant. The beacon began to pulse more rapidly, its organic components throbbing with increased blood flow, its mechanical parts humming as power surged through them. Then I felt it, a vast and distant consciousness, turning its attention toward our call. Something ancient beyond reckoning, cold as the void between stars, hungry with a hunger that could never be satisfied. The hive mind, the gestalt consciousness of the Tyranid race, had heard our beacon. A tendril of its awareness reached across the void, touched upon our brood mind, and acknowledged our call. They were coming. The human part of me, what remained of Arvin Creel, wanted to scream, to weep, to rage against what we had done. But that part was now a mere whisper, almost completely subsumed by the hybrid nature that had overtaken me. Instead, I felt only satisfaction, a sense of purpose fulfilled. The Great Devourer would come, and we, its advanced guard, would be rewarded with absorption into its perfect being. The chant reached its crescendo, the psychic beacon pulsing with energy that could be felt even by those without psychic sensitivity. The air in the chamber seemed to waver, reality itself disturbed by the power we were channeling. The Patriarch's form shuddered in what might have been ecstasy, its connection to the greater Tyranid consciousness momentarily direct and unfiltered. Then came the response, not just acknowledgement but instructions. Data flooding into the brood mind, too complex for my partially transformed consciousness to fully comprehend. The Patriarch absorbed it all, processed it, then relayed simplified versions to the rest of us. I understood enough. The Hive Fleet had altered course. It was coming for Forge World Helios Secundus, but it would take time, perhaps as much as a solar year, for even the fastest advanced elements to reach us. We would need to survive until then, to continue our infiltration, to weaken the Forge World's defenses from within, to prepare it for consumption. The chant began to wind down, the beacons pulsing, slowing to a more sustainable rhythm. It would continue to call, a constant signal that the Hive Fleet could follow across the void. But the intense burst that had initially attracted their attention was over. Now came the long wait. As the gathering began to disperse, each group of hybrids assigned to new tasks by the brood mind, I felt a subtle shift in the psychic network, a new current of emotion originating from the upper levels of the underhive. Fear, pain. Thekatari had found one of our larger nests, one containing many of the newer converts who had not yet learned to hide their nature effectively. The slaughter was absolute. I felt each death as a small flicker in the brood mind, a candle being snuffed out. Thekatari showed no mercy, made no attempt to distinguish between the fully transformed and those only recently infected. All were purged with bolt, flame, and blade. "They are more effective than anticipated," said Vex, the medic hybrid, who had been part of my strike team. Her transformation had accelerated rapidly after the beacon's activation, her lower jaw now distended to accommodate an extra row of needle-like teeth, her eyes taking on the faceted appearance of the pure strain Genestealer. "It will not matter," replied another hybrid. This one so far along that its speech was barely comprehensible through its mutated vocal apparatus. "The call has been made. The Great Devourer comes. These machines only delay the inevitable, but I could sense the concern rippling through the brood mind. Thekatari were moving more quickly than expected, their purge more thorough. If they maintained this pace, they might reach the beacon chamber before the Hive Fleet arrived. All would be for nothing. New orders pulsed through the psychic network. We would need to slow Thekatari advance to distract them, to lead them away from the beacon. Sacrifices would be necessary. I was assigned to a diversion team along with Vex and 7 others in various stages of transformation. We would stage an attack on one of the primary manufacturum levels, drawing Kari forces away from their methodical sweep of the underhive. It was a suicide mission, though that term held little meaning to beings who saw death merely as reabsorption into the greater whole of the brood. As we prepared to ascend from the depths, gathering weapons scavenged from fallen Forge World personnel, I felt the human part of me stirring once more. not in horror at what I had become, but in recognition of an opportunity. If I could somehow break free of the broodmind's control, even momentarily, I might be able to guide Thekatari to the beacon chamber to end this before it was too late. But the thought was immediately detected, my connection to the broodmind making any form of deception almost impossible. Vex turned to me, her faceted eyes unreadable, but her psychic presence cold with suspicion. "The human part of you still resists," she said, her words distorted by her mutated mouth. "It will pass. With each hour what you were diminishes. What you are becoming grows stronger." "I know," I replied, forcing the hybrid part of me to take control, to project the proper submission to the brood mind's will. "It is of no consequence." She studied me a moment longer, then turned away, apparently satisfied, but I felt a subtle change in the psychic network surrounding me. The brood mind was watching more closely now, ready to detect any further sign of rebellion. My chance, if it had ever truly existed, was gone. We moved upward through maintenance shafts and forgotten access tunnels, avoiding the main routes where Qatari patrols would be heaviest. The manufacturum level we were targeting was a munitions production facility, where workers assembled bolter shells and lassacs for distribution to Imperial Guard regiments throughout the sector. The symbolic value of such a target would ensure a rapid and overwhelming Qatari response, drawing forces away from the Underhive and giving other broodkin time to better conceal the beacon chamber. As we neared the upper levels, I began to notice changes in my perception. Sounds became sharper, colors more vivid. Scents carried information they never had when I was human. Chemical signatures that told me about the emotional states and species of beings who had passed through these areas. My muscles felt taut with energy, ready to explode into action with a speed no unmodified human could match. The transformation was accelerating. Whatever temporary control the human part of me might have exerted was fading rapidly. Soon, there would be nothing left of Arvin Creel but memories absorbed and retained by the hybrid creature that had replaced him. We reached the access point to the manufacturum level, a maintenance hatch that opened onto a secondary storage area for component parts. I could smell the humans beyond. Dozens of them, their scents rich with the chemical markers of fatigue, stress, and the metallic taint of the materials they worked with. Beneath those scents, the richness of blood and tissue, biomass that could feed the brood. The hunger rose in me, sudden and overwhelming, not the dull ache of human hunger, but something primal and consuming, a need that went beyond sustenance to become the central purpose of existence. I wanted to tear through that hatch, to fall upon the unsuspecting workers, to feed and feed until the hunger was momentarily sated. Only the iron control of the brood mind held me back, reminding me of our actual purpose. On my signal, whispered the most transformed of our group, a creature that had once been a shift supervisor named Thu. "Remember the plan. Maximum chaos, maximum visibility. Draw their attention fully before allowing yourselves to be driven back towards Sector 17, away from the beacon chamber." We all nodded. The coordination of the brood mind makes verbal confirmation unnecessary. I flexed my hands, watching as the fingers elongated further, the skin hardening into chitin, the nails extending into razor-sharp claws. The changes could be controlled to some extent, held back when concealment was necessary, accelerated when combat was imminent. Another gift from the Genestealer genetics that now dominated my cellular structure. Thula gave the signal, a psychic pulse that resonated through the brood mind. As one, we burst through the maintenance hatch into the storage area beyond. The workers there, 2 men checking inventory on component shelving, had no time to react before we were upon them. I took the nearest, my claws opening his throat in a spray of arterial blood that triggered an almost ecstatic response in my altered nervous system. The scent, the warmth, the vitality of it sent shivers of pleasure through me. The hunger demanded that I feed, but the mission parameters overrode that instinct. We needed to be seen to cause alarm to draw the Renxi's Skitarii. Feeding could come later if any of us survived. We burst from the storage area into the main manufacturing floor. Dozens of workers looked up from their assembly stations, expressions shifting from surprise to horror as they beheld our transformed state. For a moment there was absolute silence, as if reality itself paused to acknowledge the wrongness of our existence in this ordered human space. Then the screaming began. Workers fled in all directions, some making for the main exits, others hiding beneath workstations or behind machinery. A few, braver or more foolish than the rest, grabbed tools as improvised weapons and moved to confront us. They died first, their courage no match for the speed and strength our transformations had granted us. The alarm klaxons began to wail, the sound piercing even to unmodified human ears, agonizing to our enhanced senses. But we endured it, continuing our rampage across the manufacturing floor. We did not kill indiscriminately. That would have been inefficient. Instead, we focused on causing maximum visible damage, tearing apart workstations, rupturing promethium lines, sending machinery crashing to the floor in showers of sparks and twisted metal. Responding, Vex called out, her enhanced senses detecting the approach of our true targets. 30 seconds. We continued our destruction until the last possible moment, ensuring that the scale of our attack would demand a significant response force. Then, as planned, we began our fighting retreat, moving back toward the maintenance access points that would lead us to Sector 17, drawing the Skeety away from the beacon chamber. The first entered the manufacturer with the mechanical precision for which they were known. No hesitation, no caution, simply an immediate assessment of the threat and appropriate response. The last fire cut through the air, striking one of our numbers with unerring accuracy. The hybrid fell, its torso corded by the high-powered beam, its connection to the brood mine snuffed out instantly. We returned fire with scavenged weapons, more to maintain the illusion of resistance than with any real hope of harming the war through their armored environmental suits. Their augment targeting systems gave them an accuracy no unmodified human could hope to match, and their weapons were designed to deal with threats far more dangerous than partially transformed hybrids. Another of our group fell, then a third. We accelerated our retreat, drawing Thekatari after us into the maintenance tunnels. The confined space would work to our advantage, limiting the number of Qatari who could bring their weapons to bear at any one time. It would not save us, but it would extend the chase, keeping them occupied for longer. I was the last to enter the tunnels, pausing at the entrance to fire a final burst from my scavenged daughter pistol, more for effect than with any expectation of causing harm. As I turned to follow my broodkin, a last beam caught me in the shoulder, spinning me around and slamming me against the tunnel wall. The pain was intense, but strangely distant, my altered physiology already working to minimize the damage and begin repairs. I staggered after the others, the scent of my own burned flesh filling my nostrils. Behind us, I could hear the mechanical precision of Thekatari advance, neither hurried nor cautious, simply implacable. The sound of their augment limbs striking the metal floor created a rhythm like a mechanical heartbeat. The tempo of death approaches with mathematical certainty. We fled deeper into the maintenance tunnels, taking turns and junctions seemingly at random, but actually following a path laid out in the brood mind. The goal was not to escape, which would have been impossible, but to lead Thekatari on a lengthy pursuit through the most convoluted and difficult-to-navigate sections of the Underhive, keeping them occupied for as long as possible. Another of our number fell, caught by a last beam, as she rounded a corner too slowly. The momentary flash of her pain through the brood mind was followed by the cold emptiness of disconnection. 5 of us remained now out of the original 9. We were accomplishing our purpose, but the cost was high. Section 23, ahead. Vex gasped, her voice distorted by the accelerating changes to her vocal apparatus. Ambush point. We had prepared for this operation with the meticulous planning that was the hallmark of the brood mind. Section 23 was a junction chamber where maintenance tunnels from 3 different levels intersected. Some of our broodkin had rigged the chamber with improvised explosives, salvaged from the manufacturum levels and repurposed. Not enough to seriously harm Thekatari, but sufficient to slow them down to add precious minutes to our diversion. We burst into the junction chamber and took up positions on the far side. Weapons trained on the tunnel from which the skittery would emerge. Thal activated the detonator, a crude device cobbled together from salvage tech. Nothing happened. The explosives had failed, or perhaps been discovered and neutralized by an advanced team of servitors. Our carefully planned ambush was now simply another killing ground with us as the targets rather than the skitari. "Fall back," Thule ordered, both verbally and through the brood mind, secondary route. But it was too late. The Qatari appeared at the tunnel entrance, their weapons already firing with the perfect accuracy of machine-guided targeting. Thule went down first, multiple las beams converging on his center mass, burning through chitin and flesh alike. The most transformed of us, he had presented the most obvious target. Vex and another hybrid, a former dock worker like myself, whose name I had never learned, tried to provide covering fire as the remaining two of us retreated toward one of the other tunnel entrances. The former dock worker died almost immediately, his head vaporized by a precision shot. Vex lasted longer, her partially transformed state granting her reflexes fast enough to dodge the first volley of Lasire, but there was nowhere to take cover in the exposed junction chamber. The second volley caught her as she tried to leap to safety, last beams cutting through her legs and lower torso. She fell in a heap of twitching limbs, still alive, still connected to the brood mind. Her pain is a screaming presence in our shared consciousness. I hesitated, torn between the instinct to flee and the pull of kinship with Vex. That moment of indecision nearly cost me my life as a last beam scorched past my head close enough that I could smell my hair burning. The surviving hybrid grabbed my arm, yanking me toward the tunnel entrance with strength no human could possess. "She is already dead," he hissed, speaking of Vex. "The mission continues." He was right. I could feel Vex's presence in the brood mind fading, her life bleeding out onto the metal decking of the junction chamber. Thekatari would grant her no mercy, and would not waste a clean execution shot on a Xenos abomination. They would let her die slowly, or perhaps take her still-living body for examination by the biologist tech priests, a fate worse than any death. We fled down the secondary tunnel, the sounds of the Qatari pursuit following close behind. Our diversion was working, drawing them away from the beacon chamber, but the cost had been higher than anticipated. Only 2 of us remained from the original 9, and the guitar showed no signs of abandoning the chase. "We need to split up," my companion said as we reached another junction. "Double their problem." I nodded, understanding the logic. 2 targets moving in different directions would force Thekatari to either divide their forces, reducing their effectiveness, or choose to follow only one of us, allowing the other to potentially escape and continue the diversion elsewhere. "Section 32, he said, indicating the right-hand tunnel. "I will take Section 29, he gestured to the left. We clasped our forearms briefly, a gesture that felt strangely human despite our transformed state. Then we parted, each running down our chosen tunnel without looking back. I felt his presence in the brood mind growing more distant, as the physical distance between us increased, but the connection remained. A subtle awareness of his continued existence. I ran with a speed and endurance no human could have matched. My transformed physiology, allowing me to maintain a pace that would have exhausted an unmodified human within minutes. The maintenance tunnel twisted and turned, descending deeper into the underhive. I recognized my surroundings from the collective knowledge of the brood mind, a mental map formed from the experiences of countless broodkin who had traversed these passages before me. Section 32 was a water reclamation facility, long abandoned after the aquifer it had once tapped ran dry. The vast chamber, with its network of pipes and filtration systems, would provide ample hiding places and multiple escape routes. If I could reach it before the skitter caught up, I might be able to lose them in the labyrinthine interior, extending the chase for hours. I felt a sudden sharp pain in the brood mind, then the cold emptiness of disconnection. My companion had been found and eliminated. The Kari had either split their forces successfully, or more likely had chosen his trail to follow rather than mine. Either way, he was gone, and I was now the sole survivor of our diversion team. I pushed myself harder, ignoring the burning in my muscles and the throbbing pain from my last wounded shoulder. The entrance to Section 32 lay just ahead, a heavy pressure door designed to contain potential flooding in the event of a catastrophic system failure. It stood partially open, jammed by accumulated debris from centuries of neglect. I squeezed through the gap, the edges of the door scraping against my hardened skin. Beyond lay the reclamation facility, vast and echoing, its ceiling lost in darkness overhead. Ancient filtration tanks stood in rows like silent sentinels, their surfaces thick with the dust of centuries. Pipes of various sizes crisscrossed the space, some large enough for a human to walk through upright, others barely wide enough to crawl through. The perfect environment for an extended game of hide-and-seek with Thekatari. But as I paused to catch my breath and consider my next move, I became aware of a change in the brood mind. A shift in the collective awareness, a new current of emotion flowing through the psychic network. Alarm, urgency. Thekatari had altered their pattern. While some continued to pursue me and other diversion teams, a significant force had changed direction, heading directly for the beacon chamber. Somehow they had discovered its location. The knowledge hit me with the force of a physical blow. Our sacrifice was to be for nothing. The beacon would be destroyed before the Hive Fleet could reach us. The Great Devourer would pass this world by, never knowing how close its children had come to preparing the way. We were connected directly to the beacon's control mechanisms, both physically through bioelectric interfaces grafted onto our flesh and psychically through our link to the brood mind. At the proper moment, we would channel our own life energy into the beacon, causing it to discharge its accumulated psychic power in a single massive burst. The first warnings of Thekatari approach came through the brood mind, a ripple of alarm from the outermost centuries. The Mechanicus forces were advancing with their usual methodical precision, Servitor scouts preceding the main force to map the terrain and identify defensive positions. Our ambushes claimed several of these scouts, but not enough to significantly slow the advance or prevent the intelligence they gathered from reaching the Kari commanders. The first proper engagement came at the outermost barricade, a hastily constructed barrier of twisted metal and debris blocking one of the main approach tunnels. The broodkin positioned there, mostly newer converts with a few more transformed hybrids for close combat capability, put up a fierce resistance. But against the superior weaponry and tactical programming of Thekatari, they were fighting a losing battle from the start. I felt each death as a small, cold silence in the brood mind. The psychic network is losing nodes one by one. The outer barricade fell within 20 minutes of the first contact. The second lasted barely 15. Thekatari were advancing with implacable determination. Their casualties were significant but sustainable. Their progress slowed but not stopped by our desperate defense. As they drew closer to the beacon chamber, the Patriarch's presence in the brood mind grew more dominant, its will subsuming the individual consciousness of the defenders. We became extensions of its purpose, our actions guided by its strategic vision rather than our own limited perspectives. The fear and doubt that might have affected individual fighters was replaced by the cold certainty of the collective. The third and final outer barricade fell after 30 minutes of intense fighting. Thekatari now stood at the entrance to the beacon chamber itself. Their forces somewhat diminished by the running battle through the underhive, but still more than sufficient to overwhelm the remaining defenders. They paused briefly, perhaps to receive new tactical instructions from their tech priest controllers, or to allow their weapon systems to cool after the sustained combat. In that moment of respite, I felt the Patriarch's attention focused specifically on me and the other hybrids connected to the beacon. A complex series of instructions flowed through the brood mind, too intricate to be expressed in human language. We were to wait until Thekatari had fully committed to their assault on the chamber, until their forces were concentrated within the blast radius of the beacon's overload. Only then were we to trigger the catastrophic discharge that would be our final service to the brood. Thekatari assault, when it came, was overwhelming in its intensity and precision. They breached the chamber entrance with shaped charges that sent shrapnel tearing through the ranks of the defenders. Then they advanced in fire teams, each unit covering the others as they leapfrogged forward, las weapons cutting down any broodkin who presented a target. The Patriarch itself led the defense, its massive form charging directly into Thekatari formation, claws tearing through their armored environmental suits as though they were paper. For a brief moment, it seemed as though its sheer physical power might turn the tide of battle. 3 Kari went down in as many seconds, their augment limbs and organic components alike shredded by the Patriarch's frenzied attack. Then Thekatari adjusted their tactics, bringing their heavier weapons to bear. A plasma gun discharged, the superheated matter striking the Patriarch in the center of its mass. Chitin blackened and cracked under the intense heat, flesh beneath vaporizing instantly. The Patriarch staggered, but did not fall. Its vitality far exceeds that of a normal organism. A second plasma blast followed, then a third, each causing catastrophic damage to the Patriarch's form. Through the brood mind, I felt its pain as though it were my own, a searing agony that threatened to overwhelm my consciousness. But beneath the pain was an iron purpose, a final command being transmitted to me and the other hybrids connected to the beacon. The time had come. The Skiteri were fully committed to the assault, their forces concentrated within the chamber. We were to trigger the overload now while the beacon still functioned and the psychic network remained intact enough to channel our collective energy. I reached for the bioelectric interface grafted to my flesh. My transformed fingers closed around the organic material that connected me directly to the beacon's control systems. The other hybrids did the same, our actions perfectly synchronized through the brood mind. Together, we began to channel our life energy into the beacon, feeling our own vitality draining away as the psychic capacitors charged beyond their safe operational parameters. The Patriarch, despite its grievous wounds, fought on with redoubled fury, seeking to buy us the few seconds necessary to complete the overload sequence. It tore through another fire team before a sustained barrage of last fire finally brought it down. Its massive form collapsed amidst the carnage it had created. Its physical death did not immediately silence its presence in the brood mind. Its psychic essence lingered, continuing to coordinate the remaining defenders and maintain the connection between the hybrids and the beacon. I felt my consciousness beginning to fade as more and more of my life energy transferred to the beacon. The process was irreversible now, a one-way journey toward oblivion. But there was no fear, no regret. The hybrid part of me felt only satisfaction at fulfilling my purpose in service to the brood mind, and the human part, what little remained of Avon Creel, felt a strange sort of peace. An end to the horror my existence had become. An end to the hunger that had consumed me, an end to the knowledge of what I had done in service to an alien will. The beacon's pulsing quickened, becoming erratic as the overload approached critical levels. Energy coursed through the hybrid systems, organic components rupturing under the strain, mechanical parts glowing with excess power. The air itself seemed to thicken, reality distorting under the pressure of the psychic energy being channeled. Thekatari, recognizing the imminent catastrophe, began a fighting withdrawal from the chamber. But it was too late. The chain reaction had begun, the energy cascade building toward an explosive release that nothing could prevent.
The last thing I saw before my organic vision failed was the beacon itself, pulsing with a light that seemed to bleed from the visible spectrum into something else, something that hurt the mind to perceive. Then came the detonation, a soundless explosion of pure psychic energy that tore through physical and mental barriers alike. I felt my physical form disintegrating, molecules separating under forces never meant to exist in the material universe. But my consciousness bound to the brood mind persisted for a fraction of a second longer, long enough to feel the psychic shockwave expanding outward. Not just through the underhive, but beyond, into the void, carrying with it the final desperate call of the brood to its masters. The signal reached the approaching hive fleet, a death cry that contained within it all the information the Tyranid collective needed. The location of Forge World Helios, Secundus, its defenses and vulnerabilities. The biomass it represented, ripe for harvesting. The signal was received, acknowledged. The Great Devourer adjusted its course, accelerated its advance. They would come not in a solar year as originally estimated, but within months. Too soon for the Forge World to prepare adequate defenses, too soon for evacuation, even if the Mechanicus were willing to abandon such a valuable industrial asset, which they would not be. The sacrifice of the brood had not been in vain. The feast would proceed as planned. As my consciousness finally dissolved, the last fragment of what had once been, Arvin Creel felt a moment of purest horror at what we had accomplished, at the doom we had ensured for this world and all who dwelt upon it. But that horror was swallowed by the vastness of the brood mind. A single discordant note drowned in a symphony of alien purpose. My last thought before even the brood mind released its hold on what remained of my being was a question without an answer.
Had there ever truly been an Arvin Creel? Or had I always been just a vessel waiting to be filled with the will of the Great Devourer? Then nothing, silence, darkness, peace. But the story of Forge World Helios Secundus was far from over. 3 standard months after the destruction of the beacon chamber, the first tendrils of Hive Fleet Kraken entered the system. By then, the Mechanicus had purged the underhive of all Genestealer presence, exterminating not just the hybrids, but thousands of uninfected human workers as well, deemed to be potential contamination risks. The Forge World's defenses had been bolstered, its orbital batteries upgraded, its Qatari legions reinforced from other Forge Worlds in the sector. None of it would be enough. The Great Devourer had heard the call of its children, and it had come to feast. The first wave of Maic spores breached the planetary defense grid with minimal losses, delivering Tyranid organisms directly to the surface. The harvest of Forge World Helios Secundus had begun a process that would continue until every scrap of biomass had been consumed, until the once vital industrial world was reduced to a barren, airless rock useful only for the trace minerals that might be extracted from its corpse. And somewhere in the vast distributed consciousness that was the hive mind, a fragment of memory remained. The experiences of a brood that had prepared the way. The life and death of a hybrid that had once been a dock worker named Arvin Creel. Data points in the endless calculation of consumption that drove the Great Devourer in its eternal hunger. In the Imperium's official records, Forge World Helios Secundus would be listed as lost to Xenos infestation, a footnote in the endless chronicle of humanity's struggle for survival in a galaxy of horrors. Few would remember its name. Fewer still would know the truth of how it fell, of how the enemy came from within before it came from the stars. But I remember, for I am the brood mind, and the brood mind is me. I am the hunger that never ceases. I am the patient infiltrator. I am the beacon that calls the Great Devourer to feast, and I am coming for your world next.